I'm just scared, the tournament and everything. Just,
You remember lesson about balance?
yeah.
A lesson not just karate only. Lesson for whole life. Whole life have a balance. Everything be better. Understand?
Yeah, I understand.
Welcome to No Mercy, a Cobra Kai Kickback. My name is Jacob Burrows and I am Miyagi-Do. I meditate almost every day and try to be all namaste, but I have a hidden rage underneath. Today, someone bumped into me at the store and I threatened to kick them out a window, but I didn't.
And my name is Jim Scampoli. I represent Cobra Kai because I have a tough exterior and a temper that can get me into trouble. But inside, I'm just trying to do what's right. And don't even get me started on my past.
Despite the fact that we're from such rivaling dojos, me and Jim have wanted to do a podcast about Cobra Kai ever since the show started. The timing was always just a bit off. We were busy discussing other shows at showswhatyouknow.com. So now, in the lead up to season 3 of Cobra Kai, we had just concluded Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit down where we discuss every episode of The Sopranos, and we wanted to get into Cobra Kai, but we were like, where do we start? And what did we come up with, Jim?
Start at the beginning, Karate Kid. We wouldn't have Cobra Kai if it wasn't for the Karate Kid. The movies.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No Cobra Man without Karate Kid. So we've gone back, and this episode, we're just going to talk about the film Karate Kid, the one that started it all, and what we feel about it, and especially how it relates to Cobra Kai. Now, if you haven't watched Cobra Kai, we might drop some spoilers. We're not going to get into details, but it's basically season 1 and 2 have aired at this point if you're listening in the future, just for reference, in case we drop any spoilers, but I wouldn't be too worried about it. Karate Kid, Jim, was this an important film for you growing up?
You know what? It really was, and I kind of didn't realize it or really think about it until Cobra Kai came out a couple of years ago. And I mean, my whole thing is when I watched Cobra Kai, I was actually on a flight to Tokyo, first time traveling internationally, and the show had been out for a couple of weeks, and I thought it looked cool, but I just hadn't seen it yet. And it was on a 10-hour flight, and about halfway through, I took a nap, did all this other stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, hey, there's this show. I'll check out a couple episodes, watch the whole thing in one go, and basically was finishing the 10th episode as we were landing. Like, it was so perfect. There was moments like, I mean, again, we're not going to get too much into Cobra Kai yet, but there were moments where I'm just like, get tears in my eyes as I'm watching the show on a plane. And it really did remind me that, yes, as a kid, I didn't have the Miyagi headband because we didn't have merchandise like we do nowadays, where as soon as something comes out, you have all the merchandise immediately. So I remember like just tying hand towels around my head and trying to do the crane kick. Like it really is like, you forget. I don't know if it's because Star Wars went away for a while. People forget that Star Wars went away for a while in the early 90s, and then it came back in the mid 90s with the re-releases and then of sequels. And so you're reminded constantly that you love Star Wars as a little kid.
Yeah.
And Karate Kid, I loved it. I probably even more than Star Wars, but I forgot about it because it wasn't around that much. I mean, it would pop up every now and then. There was like a music video that had Johnny in it. There was, of course, that viral video that people want to take credit. They give credit for the Cobra Kai series, the one about how Daniel is the bully, and little things here and there, but it just wasn't in my head all the time. So I forgot that how important this was to me when I was a little kid.
Yeah. I'll admit that for me as a Swede, you kind of, it's kind of based on whatever's on TV. Cause like, I mean, I wouldn't have seen this unless it was on TV, basically. And I don't think it was. I remember seeing it. I was probably a teenager when I saw it, and I liked it a lot. but I guess it was Cobra Kai. And I mean, I felt more emotions watching it on this rewatch. I
Yeah,
got pretty emotional, Jim,
yeah,
because I've not watched Karate Kid since Cobra Kai, and I mean, we'll get obviously on this podcast way into Cobra Kai, how it has no business being as good as it actually is for being
yes,
like what it is. But it's a really good show. We both really like it. But the thing is, the thing I always thought about Cobra Kai is that it does a great job of pulling things from Karate Kid, this thing that is from the 80s. It has all of this nostalgia tied up with it. Even if you didn't watch it as a young child, I watched it like years and years before. But it's like it's the same actors, and I don't know, the same way that Cobra Kai draws on Karate Kid and the whole entangled nostalgia there, for me it now works the other way around as well. Because Cobra Kai's been around for a few years, and there's moments in there of seeing these children grow up and what they do when they're adults and how they deal with their problems then. And it's a fucking show about karate, and I'm sure we're gonna say that loads, and I shouldn't be getting that worked up about it. But like, Karate Kid has so many gut punches when you're looking at it after Cobra Kai and thinking like of everything that Daniel-san is going to become, and when he first meets Mr. Miyagi. And obviously Johnny Lawrence is not a very three-dimensional character here, but still there's moments with him when you're thinking of everything in Cobra Kai, and I don't know, it makes the whole experience of watching Karate Kid totally different in a way I didn't expect. I thought it just went the other way around, you know?
absolutely, absolutely. And I think we've talked a little bit in passing when we always mentioned how like, damn, we got to get our Cobra Kai show going. That there, like the movie itself, like it's a little of both. Like, you know, Karate Kid on surface is like you said, such a product of its time, and you just think it's this dated thing. And Cobra Kai seems like it's such a smart way to kind of play around with that, but also it's like it's cohesive because they lay enough groundwork there, and the showrunners of Cobra Kai are smart enough to mine those like little things that are in the movie that it all works so well. And I mean, not to jump too ahead, but just the fact that when it ends and Johnny goes up to him and he's like, you know, you're all right, LaRusso, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's such an important thing that kind of plays out really well in Cobra Kai, but also it's such a smart thing that they put in the movie because it ties into what Mr. Miyagi says when he says, you know, it's not like he's not a bad, there's no such thing as a bad student, it's just a bad teacher.
Yeah.
So they're laying into that like subtle little moment that, yeah, it is Kreese is the real villain. This kid Johnny, yeah, we make him kind of, he's a bully, he's a classic 80s bully, but they give just enough of a little bit there to show that he's just a kid. And even the other kids, when you know, he's telling the other guy to like just kick his leg and injure him, and he's like, but sensei, you know, I could beat him. Like there's little reminders that these are just kids and they are in a silly karate tournament.
Yeah.
But you know, there's like important subtext of how adults can really affect a kid's life, and you know, they really will learn from an adult and what kind of sway you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, they hint at that. There's just small stuff that in Karate Kid just makes it a better film. That also means that it can be expanded upon much more effectively, like those little moments that just, you know, in the moment, it's just like this hints at a three-dimensionality and a lot more happening behind the scenes of the minds of these characters, even though it's a cheesy 80s film. And also, similarly with all the talk of like the clip from the beginning of our episode where Miyagi's talking about life and finding balance and these things that are things that you can carry with you through your whole life and see like how has this affected you in the future and just how you relate to the past. And of course, I mean, fucking gut punch number one, Mr. Miyagi's own background, his past, and how that relates to the future and everything. I mean, there's a lot going on here, and it's just a fabulous 80s cheese on top of everything as well.
Yeah. And what I wanted to ask about this movie is like, I'm obviously aware of a 3-act structure. I'm not like, I don't read books on it, so I don't know all the specifics. I hear people talk about how, especially in a movie, you want the inciting incident or whatever, this thing to happen on page this and whatnot. But when I was rewatching the movie here, I mean, I guess it has a 3 act structure, but not really, right? I mean, are you a bit more versed in the more specifics of a 3 act structure? Because it feels like they do stuff that you're not supposed to do, but it makes the movie better because they spend more time, I guess, maybe in the 2nd act, or because it feels like it's a long time before he becomes friends with Mr. Miyagi. And then even then, it's kind of a long time before he starts training him. Yeah. And then even in the training, like that goes a long time. And then the whole thing with Allie, that I think is more of a negative because the thing with Allie is we're repeating the same scenario over and over again where Daniel gets mad because he doesn't like his station in life and rejects her, and then he comes back and apologizes and whatever. But I don't know. What can you tell me about the 3 act structure in Karate Kid?
Damn, I wish I knew beforehand that this had homework, Jim. But,
I'm sorry. I don't mean to put you on the spot like that, but
no, it's I love thinking about that sort of thing. The thing I always try to advocate about when you talk about story structure and things like that, it always comes down to what works for you as a writer. Like if you're writing something, you can apply the same principles, whether you call it a 3 act structure or you call it a story circle or you call it, hero's journey or whatever, as whatever works for you to put together the better story. It's basically the same shit underneath, I think. It's basically just comes down to what's a good story. But if we're looking at it as a 3 act structure, I think the pace of the film is probably maybe throwing you off there where you're thinking, because we do hang out a lot in these moments, and it adds so much to the film, especially like moments with Mr. Miyagi that are more contemplative and stuff like that, and not just shoving lessons down your throat, but sort of sitting with certain things. But yeah, no, it's fairly long as a film. I'd say it's also, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I could sit down and pick out the different inciting incidents and whatever, and you could probably pretty clearly divide it where I think it's. I'm just checking the storyline now if I'm fooling myself, but it is kind of it's almost the middle of the film when he gets the challenge, for doing the big fight in
the tournament.
Yeah, I'd say the middle bit is still the escalating stuff. I don't have it in my head exactly, but I feel that it's very structurally sound. It's just that the pace is a bit different, and that's why it feels like that. Though the one thing that sticks out to me is you're usually always supposed to have a thing after the climax that sort of shows you how things settle down. And it's kind of a bold move that they just freeze on Mr. Miyagi there. But I think, because of everything beforehand, because we've had the more time to settle in with things, because Mr. Miyagi talks about the future and balance and things like that, and also because Lawrence runs up with the trophy and gives it to him, like, that's all you need at the very end. You don't, it wouldn't even make sense to have an extra scene afterwards where it's like, and this is what Daniel's life was like after that. It would just cheapen it. And that moment, they spend so much time building to it, and it's so great that it would just kind of make it a bit more, I don't know. They don't need anything else. It's just, I feel like, I don't know the production, but I feel like they had more stuff after that, and they were just like, nah, just end it there. That's the good moment.
Well, it's funny too.
Music.
I was watching it with my girlfriend, and she even said, she's like, I love that it just ends on Mr. Miyagi. It cuts to him, look proud of Daniel, and then I think you just kind of can hear Daniel off screen being like, yeah, Mr. Miyagi, and then it fades out. And I guess you're right. Looking at it, I guess it's about 49 minutes in is when they walk into Cobra Kai together, Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, to kind of lay down the challenge. The movie, I mean, I guess with credits, it's showing me 2 hours, 6 minutes. But I guess it ends about 2 hours, 2 minutes or so. And you're right. I guess it's because you're right. It's more the pacing, because I think they kind of hit a few of the moments more than once. And I'm not complaining. True. I'm not saying that's bad. I guess it's kind of a nice, I guess, juxtaposition to now, you mentioned the 80s cheese, and there's definitely 80s cheese there, but we like to think of ourselves as more refined now, and our entertainment's so much more elevated. but in a weird way, I guess things are more formulaic now. So when I watch this movie, it comes off a little more off kilter because they're spending more time like with Mr. Miyagi and with Daniel. And you mentioned like Mr. Miyagi's backstory, which they touch on in such a brilliant scene that in my mind, I'm like, that movie, they wouldn't even have that now because they would give maybe
it doesn't serve the story enough or whatever.
And I wonder, I don't know if there was discussion or pushback when they were making the film, if they were like, oh, do we need this? Because you could totally see them taking that out, and it would be a travesty if they did, because it's such a great scene and moment and explanation of Mr. Miyagi and like tragedy.
Yeah.
But I give it so much credit for it being there. And we like to think that, not necessarily all older films, but especially if we point to something like it from the 80s called The Karate Kid, and you'd like to think of it as just some like cornball movie, but like it has a scene like that, and there's so much depth there. And like as a kid, obviously, I don't know what's going on. I'm not picking up. I'm like, oh, Mr. Miyagi's drunk. This is funny. He's yelling and drinking.
Yeah.
And now I'm watching it and I have like tears in my eyes.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, this poor guy who still fought for his country, and it took everything away from him. And that's why like he's still like this hermit. And I like to think that, Daniel is this his first like connection ever, like since all this tragedy in his life. But whatever. Either way, it really struck me watching it and just thinking about the way the movie plays out. And I guess it's because they don't just hit the incident and then immediately get the ball moving to the next thing. They might hit the moment and then let things breathe a bit, and then we start getting into the next thing. And I guess it struck me a bit in comparison to a lot of the stuff that comes out now.
Well, it's directed by John G. Avildsen, who directed Rocky famously. And Rocky's a film that I've seen so many jokes and references to, but I only watched a couple of years ago for the first time. And that's also an interesting one where it's because it's obviously almost 10 years before Karate Kid, but like the pace is so different from what you expect, because there's been like a dozen or 100 films with Rocky similarities since. They've sort of perfected, in quotes, that formula and made it like, this is what a film about, a big fight or a sports team or whatever, this is what the film should be like. So you have you hit those moments, and then you eat your popcorn and you go the fuck home. And in Rocky, like there were a lot of those types of moments as well, where it's like, we're sitting with this and we're sitting with that, and part of that is just like filmmaking being different in the 70s and 80s, but it's also like, I don't know, besides the fact that it's has a big fight at the end, that's a similarity as well. But besides that, just the willingness to sit with unexpected parts of it, to explore unexpected emotional bits of something that could just be a big fight thing. Because I feel like they would have the same moments in a modern version. We're not going to talk about the 2010 Jackie Chan Karate Kid on this podcast, if I have anything to say with it. But as a reference point, a more modern, say, made in the 2010s film along the same lines would try to have the same moments, but they'd probably feel hollow. That's what I feel like. And it somehow doesn't, even though it's so cheesy. And I know I'm probably blinded by affection, but I feel like the acting is surprisingly good in it, which it probably isn't really, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because they have a different, like there's a realism to it, but at the same time, you have the bullies coming in on dirt bikes and there's cheesy 80s music. It's just a great combination for me.
Yeah, and like the chemistry can fill in a lot too. If there was, because I agree, I think the acting's really good as well. But even if you did nitpick, some of the chemistry just works so well. And then also like going back to Rocky, and I guess this could even work as an extension to Karate Kid, because I haven't seen the sequels since I was little. And we're going to check those 2 and 3 out again. Rocky became such a thing because then the sequels like bastardized. People forgot that when you watch the first Rocky, it's completely different than if you're watching like Rocky 4 or something, when he's fighting Mother Russia and making big statements about how we can all come together and we can change the world and stuff like that. Which, hey, their thoughts are in the right place, but it's like so cornball with like the the scary Russian guy. I mean, are we going to do our Rocky podcast next? The scary Russian guy training in the Alps or some shit, and poor little Rocky being the up and comer. But yeah, like, so you forget between the first Rocky or even the Karate Kid that there's more to it than that. And especially, I think the first thought would be, the modern day thinking is that most things, especially when you go into the 80s, the 90s, 70s, whatever, that things are very problematic. And when you have a movie like The Karate Kid, and I guess you have a white kid learning from, an Asian immigrant, you would think, oh, that was made in the 80s. That's going to be fucking ridiculous. But I feel like I think a lot of people would maybe gear up to write their think pieces in this day and age. Like, what can we pick from the 80s to talk about how it's bad now? But I think you'd be hard pressed to find stuff in The Karate Kid, because I think it's, especially for the time, what you would expect. It's very respectful. And like the way we mentioned that when we get into Miyagi's backstory, there's a lot there. And I don't think people would really expect that.
Yeah. See, what was I thinking in relation to that? First off, did Rocky fight a robot, or is that like a Simpsons bit? Because I'm not sure. I didn't watch him.
He was so rich he had his own robot. Like he had a robot that would come in and bring him drinks and stuff. It was like a sign that Rocky was losing the fight. Basically, he was becoming too rich and not part of the people like he used to be.
Yeah. Okay, and the other thing was, if you're looking for something to nitpick in that sense, I guess the only thing I can think of is like
the healing.
Yeah, the Asian magic.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like that's well and truly balanced out by diving into actually telling young people, which is the main audience, like about the travesties against Asian Americans at the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of balances out, I say.
Yeah, and you could almost write that. I mean, it definitely. This is like a weak defense of it. But I'm just saying, like, if people believe in like massages or acupuncture or something, you could maybe try to rationalize it. Like, I'm just saying, if you looked at it on paper, like if you had no idea what the Karate Kid was, and someone came up to you and said, "Hey, there's this movie from the '80s, and it's about how an old Asian man trains a white kid in karate so he could fight his bullies," you'd be like, "Oh my God, fire that motherfucker in. Let's watch it, because it's going to be, so racist and problematic." But I don't think it hits the expectations that people would have.
Yeah. And so as far as that, there's two things that I find interesting, which is that originally they didn't want, do you pronounce it Pat Morita? His
yes.
His name?
Yep.
Yeah. So he auditioned for it, but they rejected him because they thought of him as more of a too comedic kind of character, and he was on Happy Days. I never watched Happy Days. I'm sure you have intimate knowledge, as a encyclopedic knowledge of all U.S. sitcoms, but he was on Happy Days. But yeah, after like it says after some failed attempts, he grew a beard and sort of patterned his accent after his uncle, and obviously like was able to show that, no, I can do a serious thing as well. And then he was nominated for an Oscar for it.
Yes.
So there's that. And interestingly as well, so the script is written by Robert Mark Kamen, who also wrote wrote for Punisher, Fifth Element, Transporter, and of course Angel Has Fallen.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that. Holy shit.
I know, fantastic film. So interestingly, when he was 17, it's partly semi-autobiographical because he was beaten up by some bullies and began to study martial arts to defend himself, but he was unhappy with his first teacher, who taught martial arts as a tool for violence and revenge, so he moved on to study Okinawan karate under a Japanese teacher who did not speak English, but who was himself a student of this certain type of karate a martial artist who founded this school of karate from the Okinawan islands, so I can't really pronounce any of it, I'm afraid. But it's interesting that, it's totally a true story, Also based on, apparently there was someone else who had optioned a news article about a young child of a single mother who had earned a black belt to defend himself against neighborhood bullies. So there was like a news article that was optioned. I guess in the same way that you option a book or whatever, they bought the rights to the news article. And then someone else had done that, and they were in touch with Robert at the time, and they combined it, and he was like, "Yeah, fuck it, we'll just take that, and then I'll write my own story based on it." So, yeah, it's a true story.
Well, weird, 'cause that's still, that movie Hustlers was the same thing. It was like I guess it was a magazine article, but that got optioned into that. So that's still going on. That's interesting because I didn't realize that. I didn't know that there was kind of some real history behind it as well. Because the only thing I was gonna also qualify is, like, again, I haven't seen Karate Kid Part 2 or Part 3 since I was,
Yeah.
so maybe as we start getting into the sequels, that changes a bit. But yeah, I was just kind of impressed by it. I was just impressed that you would think like, oh, great, here we go. Here's another thing when we look at it more in a modern point of view, you'd be able to nitpick more from it. But no, just an all around great film. Great movie. I do love that. I mean, this is some of the stuff they touch on a bit in like the Daniel was the bully. But like even at the beginning, like when Johnny rolls up, like you mentioned, they got the corny music playing where it's like back in the days when we were young, and like his buddy offers him a beer, and he's like, "No way, man, nope,
Yes.
senior year, baby, we're like, this is my rebuild year, like this is gonna be great." And even like the whole thing with like, well, there's the bizarre. It's, I guess, not that bizarre. Again, it's more of like the pacing of the time. The way the movie starts out, and over the opening credits, we have like this whole montage of the, cross country trip. Like nowadays, it would just be like, no, they pull up, they're unpacking. Here we go. Let's start the movie. But we spend a little time as we even get to see a quick glimpse of Daniel's New Jersey neighborhood, and they're all like waving goodbye. And then, I love the idea that he immediately kind of makes a friend, Freddie Rodriguez. But then even Freddie is like kind of making fun of him.
No, I love that. I love that when he gets beaten up. These guys who he's hanging out with, having a good time, they're all like, "Man, this guy's a loser because he got beat up."
And even for a moment, like when they're at the beach bonfire, Freddie feels bad for him. But the next day in school, that peer pressure is a mother, because at that point he's on board too. He's like, yeah, whatever, Karate Kid. Like they have the titular line where they're like, hey, Karate Kid. Because to be fair, Daniel is kind of like, yeah, I did a little karate back home. Like he is kind of, I guess you got to do it. You're in a new state, new city, new people. You're the new kid. He has to pitch himself as kind of a tough guy. But that karate does not play off too well when he meets Johnny and gets beat up. No,
and I kind of like that he has like, he's into karate before this, but he's just not like, he doesn't have the right karate for him yet. He's just doing the kicks. So it kind of makes it more realistic than him just going, but I've never fought anyone, and like just being the worst ever. But it's clear that he is a hothead, and like fighting is not something that is totally foreign to him. It's just that he keeps getting beaten up here. I do love as well when he's arriving there, like you said, he's kind of like, yeah, I did some, whatever. And like Daniel's just, he just, and the way he flirts with Ali as well. I don't know if I'm right, but it's very rare. Maybe it's even more rare these days, but to have a character who's like, he's just kind of cool, he's got the one-liners and everything, but he's like, he plays it all super casual, and like things don't work out for him. Like if he played it this way and everything kind of worked out for him fine without any trouble, you'd really dislike him. But like he kind of has the cool lines and everything, but then he keeps getting like beat up and shit on and everything. So you're like, oh man, Danielson, I like this guy. Because I feel like usually these days you just, I don't know, make him a computer nerd or something to make his journey more dynamic, from like he definitely would never fight anyone, and it goes all the way to him being a karate master or whatever. But I don't know, it kind of works better this way. And then you show in all sorts of small ways, like he gets water for the dog that's down there, and he doesn't, like, he's a really good kid to his mom and all this stuff. So I don't know, it just kind of works.
Yeah, and like the thing is, I was looking into it while I was watching this movie, and again, I haven't seen the sequels in a while, and I don't remember if they cover this on Cobra Kai. I don't think they do, but I was trying to I was like, well, what about Daniel's father? And I mean, I guess from what Wikipedia says is that David LaRusso had stomach cancer and he passed away. And I mean, maybe this is spoilers for 2 and 3 again. I don't really remember. And his last words were, remember, I'll always love you. So this poor kid, not only is he moving away from his friends, it's always tough in high school, especially to move and go to a new place. And he lost his dad, and he's got a chip on his shoulder because he is kind of cool, and he's trying to make new friends. He's trying to impress people, and it's not working out. But he's also got a little anger there, and obviously, Mr. Miyagi's got his situation, and of course, that writes itself as far as they're fulfilling those roles in each other's lives, the father figure, and filling in for the family. But I hope it's not just someone just made that up and it's on the and it's on the wiki. I assume they'll get into this in one of the movies. Or do you remember that being in Cobra Kai where he talks about his dad?
No, that's not in Cobra Kai. And also, I don't know. There's like no sources for this on the wiki.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Because I was trying to dig around too. So I don't know if someone just made it up or what. I guess.
And it also says fictional biography. And I don't know. Maybe that was like on a, it was the 80s. I assume there was like some short-lived magazine series or comics, or like maybe some little trading cards, Karate Kid backstories.
Absolutely what I was going to say, trading card. It was probably There was the David LaRusso trading card on the back. It said, he had stomach cancer, died when Daniel was 8 years old, and he told him that he'll always love him. And then they moved. Oh, and the other thing I want to talk about with his mom, it's such a bizarre thing. I don't know why they do it, but at the beginning, Daniel's like, yeah, my mom's got a new job, computers or something. And then I think it's Freddie, and Freddie's like, computers, wow. But then they're in the restaurant later, and she's like, this restaurant is going to make me a manager, and they're going to pay all my benefits. You could never get that in computers. And I'm like, you just went through a career change and decided to go the restaurant route over computers in the age of like the dawning of Microsoft.
Here's the thing that doesn't make any sense, all right? It makes perfect sense because he says that, right? And then you see her working in the restaurant, and you're like, okay, he was like being cool, tough guy, insecure about his mother and being a single mother and all that, and said she had a way cooler, higher paying job than she actually does. But then her mother says, I could never get this kind of money working in computers. And the same fictional biography that we just referenced about his dad also says that Lucille accepted a job at a computer firm. So this doesn't make any sense, Jim. I think that this is all fictional. I think maybe she worked in computers back in New York, and beyond that, I have no idea. I don't understand it at all, and I hope Cobra Kai Season 3 finally solves this dilemma for us.
Well, because I have to imagine that a restaurant gig isn't setting her up with an apartment, but then I guess maybe she set up on her own, but it's almost inferred that maybe her job, like she got this job and the job set her up with the place. I don't know. Maybe the restaurant would set her up with that place because it's not as nice as she's making it out to be with the whole pool and all that stuff. But I love that it I don't know. There's enough there where I think you're right. You could think that maybe Daniel's just playing it up, but she does specifically mention computers.
And also she says in the restaurant scene that great news, they're going to train me to be a manager. There's no way they get someone across the country to be a waitress and then suddenly decide they're going to be trained up to be a manager. Like surely she would have known, but I feel like this is one of those unanswerable questions that we'll just have to wait for Season 3 to start. This is what I'm waiting for. Yeah,
agreed. And going back to kind of like the little moments that make Daniel likable, I think it's a very likable, cute moment when his mom walks away and he's still talking about Allie, and he's like, she's smart, like really smart. And there's, hot. Yeah, I'd say she's hot. And just talking to himself. Great moment. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, big weirdo. I mean, if we're talking about moments, I have to mention, like, basically anything with Mr. Miyagi in it because of Cobra Kai, because of all the flashbacks and everything. It just enhances every time he's on screen. But I mean, especially finding out the sad backstory about his wife and his child that was never born. And the what actually got to me, what actually had me like bawling is the bow, because Daniel-san's there and he puts Mr. Miyagi to bed and he like reads the newspaper clippings and looks at the medals, and then on the way out he stops and he bows, and I'm getting teared up talking about it, a
Yeah.
bit choked up,
Yeah.
because he's not there to see him bow. That's him showing like he's actually taking in what Mr. Miyagi is learning, and he's also recognizing what's going on and showing him respect in the way that's appropriate and all of this stuff. So yeah, that
Yeah.
really got me.
No, it's making me like misty eyed, making me misty eyed, like you describing it and remembering it. Yeah, it's so great. Like that scene, like not too long ago, it was like a few months ago actually. Like I forget what I was doing, but it like the idea of it popped in my head. So in this age with YouTube, you could just pull it up, and yeah, I'm just watching it on YouTube, and yeah, I have like tears in the corner of my eye. And I mean, it even is kind of like it's even I mean, I guess I don't want to say tragic, but like just the idea that Pat Morita is no longer with us, so he can't be on this show. Because I think I mean, he was Mr. Miyagi many a times since then. I mean, between like Karate Kid 2, Karate Kid 3, then they did a new Karate Kid with Hilary Swank. And so like I know, I mean, he did get nominated for an Oscar and stuff like that, but in the same way that it's really cool that Cobra Kai exists, and like Ralph Macchio and is it what Daniel Zapka is that his name that plays Johnny? Like the way that these William Zapka, I'm sorry, William Zapka, the way these actors can come back and kind of relive these parts, but also kind of get some shine for it. Like it's I think it's really cool. It's cool that dude gets to have his own show essentially and replay this character, but in a fun, interesting way, and get some shine off of that. It would have been nice for Pat Morita to also be able to come back. So, it's a little bum out. And of course I hope to see, and I mean, they're hinting at it heavily, so I'd be surprised if they don't, but Elizabeth Shue come back as Allie as well. Allie with an I.
Yeah, that'll be nice. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if he was in this? But then like the nostalgia factor is almost enhanced by just we only can see him through these sort of glimpses,
Yeah.
whatever. But it is really interesting that they get to come back, a lot of them, and add dimensions to this and go like, huh, you thought I was just a cheesy show or a cheesy film from your childhood, huh? Now I'm a cheesy show from your present.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
still a cheesy show, and it still has those like the bits I love from this of like the gang pulling up with their dirt bikes and the 80s music is blasting. They get to do that level of cheese that's sort of almost like Riverdale sort of related, but it's good. And it's just so seldom that you see shows like this that are good. Never mind the fact that it's capitalizing on nostalgia. Most remakes and sequels and everything, like the whole concept is just known for being a rehash of something that's boring, doesn't add anything to the original. And Cobra Kai is just an example of what you should do if you resurrect something, that it's adding so much to it, but then also rewatching the film, as we've said many times now, it adds value to that as well. It's the absolute opposite of every bad sequel and every bad remake that you've ever seen, where it actually makes you bummed out when you watch the original thing.
Yes, yeah. And going back to like the Mr. Miyagi character, this show, and as we'll get into it when we talk about the show more, the fact that he like is such a like a spirit, like a part of the show. And I mean, especially when we get into stuff with Daniel's character, the show pays proper respects and you feel his presence throughout it.
Yeah.
And again, like after watching the show and then going back to the movie, it makes complete sense. And I mean, even going into the movie, like the Miyagi sense of humor is really great as well. Like, because even though, they throw in that moment where there's those racist guys, because that's another like it's not like they don't play into it maybe arguably enough or too much. Like nowadays, I'm sure that would be a bigger part of the movie if you made the Karate Kid now. But just the fact that they have the scene where the guys, talking shit to him and they get their beers on the car and then he karate chops the top off. But then it's so great that he's like, how'd you do that? He's like, I don't know. First time. So perfect.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm sure we could talk about this film for hours, but we have to zoom on into Karate Kid Part 2 and 3 and lots of Cobra Kai to come, so please subscribe if you're on the new feed. If you're listening to this on our Shows What You Know feed, please search for No Mercy on your podcatcher of choice to subscribe to the feed where all of this is going to drop, or simply go to showswhatyouknow.com. I also wanted to mention, since this is going to be a sort of new podcast, part of the Shows What You Know network, we'd very much appreciate some reviews on Apple Podcasts. You can just search for No Mercy, a Cobra Kai Kickback, or just No Mercy. Should probably bring it up, I hope. And then we're going to be on Spotify and all the other ones. Wherever you like, just search for No Mercy. Is there anything we should add beyond that? I just have one more thing. Do you have anything,
Well,
Jim?
before you have your one more thing, I do want to just point out that while I was watching this movie, I was looking up how to get a bonsai tree. And I guess if we're going to do a podcast, I'm probably going to have to order one and then, make sure I take care of it and figure out what needs to be done in that respect. So, hey, if maybe you should submit a review and tell me I should get a bonsai tree.
I really look forward to 3 episodes from now when you're like, yeah, I tried that visualization thing where you close your eyes and you imagine the tree. Just got a stump left. So bit of a shit teacher, that Mr. Miyagi. Let us know how many bonsai trees you want to get after watching Karate Kid in a review on Apple Podcasts. But beyond that, I just have one more thing to say, and that thing is strike first!
Strike hard!
No mercy!
No mercy! And we're out.